All right, three, two, one. All right, welcome back to another edition of the Bebo Knows podcast. This is your host Brian Bullock, and this is the annual NFL edition with the one and only Seth Byrne. How you doing today, Seth?
I am good. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on, Brian.
Yeah, Likewise. I'm glad you could join. Here comes another football season already, and
Yep.
we're still dealing with the pandemic, but we're still powering through to through another season. So with an extra game on top of it. So
Yeah,
um,
not happy about that.
so let's just there's no need for introductions. Everyone knows Seth. So one thing we left off in April with the draft, and so let's just go through like the draft a little bit before we like jump into like a little bit of a review of last year and a preview of this year. So as far as the draft goes, I mean, obviously I know you won a little bit of dough thanks to the number 3 pick, or thanks to Jones not going to the Niners. So, but aside from that, what were some things in terms of the draft? Like how did the draft play out compared to your expectations?
So this draft was so incredible. It has managed to stay until I delete status on my DVR, which a draft that just doesn't happen. You're just watching teams take players. You watch it, then you move on with your life. This one I saved. So let's actually go down through the first round.
Okay.
So Jacksonville with the first pick, Trevor Lawrence, they did not screw it up. I mean, he's been the number 1 pick for, 2-3 years now. Everyone knew. And they got him. Jets did. That sucks. With the second pick, there was some question whether that's early in the process. There was some question whether or not the Jets were going to look at Fields or Wilson. And then it became pretty obvious that they were looking at Wilson. Look, I mean, it's a reasonable pick. There are some concerns that he did very poorly when facing good teams. And in 2020, when he faced mostly weak competition with an awesome offensive line, he crushed them. But he had a lot of time to throw, and he's facing weaker competition. Now it's going to be a lot of questions whether or not that those skills will play once he's in the NFL and he's protected by the Jets' offensive line. So I don't know. I'm rooting for him, obviously, but we'll see how that goes. San Francisco, big one, did not screw it up. Thank you very much. That was very happy. That was a good time for me. I mean, I did not know that they were going to go with Lance. I thought there was at least a chance they're going with Fields. I was just very confident that Jones wasn't it, and thankfully Shanahan agreed. It's funny, and this I don't know how many people really care about this, but this pick actually goes all the way back to the Larry Tunsil trade between the Dolphins and Houston. So the Dolphins got Houston's pick, and they then traded that pick to San Francisco. So good on Miami, sucks for Houston, and good luck San Francisco. More on Fields later. Sorry, more on Lance later. More on Fields later too, but more on Lance later. Atlanta, this is where I start to disagree with the process the teams are taking. Atlanta's in a situation where they could take a massive salary cap hit with Matt Ryan, and they're going to have to purge the roster if they do that. And they could then take Fields with the 4th overall pick and turn the page. Alternately, they could do what they did and extend Ryan, or basically turn some of his salary, I believe, into a bonus so that it's stretched out over the next 3 years, which created, I think, $14 million in space, keep most of the roster together, and then take the best available non-quarterback. I kind of feel like it's okay to extend Ryan. I understand why they want to do that, but I still think it's worth it for them to trade the pick, given the kind of haul the Bears were offering. They didn't. So yeah, Pitts is a great tight end prospect, but I don't think it's the most value they could have gotten from their situation. Cincinnati, they already had their franchise QB on the roster. They weren't tempted to trade back. They wanted to give their quarterback a weapon. There was some consideration before the draft whether or not they would take the best offensive lineman available and try to protect Burrow. They did not do that, so good luck, Burrow. Miami, So they traded back from 3 to 12, and then they traded up from 12 to 6 to draft a wide receiver. And that seems to be a thing that teams want to do when they have a young quarterback, give them someone great to throw to.
Yep.
I wasn't too impressed with the trade up, but it is what it is. And now they have Waddle. In this situation, Waddle was a defensible choice as best wide receiver available. Hopefully he stays healthy. He's had some issues with that. And here's where I have some notes. There might be a bit of a principal agent problem when teams take a quarterback in the draft early. The kind of like the GM's job is tied to that quarterback succeeding. So they will trade future picks and possibly ignore their defense to make sure that the quarterback has the weapons to look good. And that might not be in the franchise's overall best interest compared to some other options, but it is what it is. GMs are human. They don't want to get fired. All right, number 7, Detroit. They were trying to trade up, and I think it was to lock Sewell, to lock him up. No one else wanted to trade back with him, and he ended up falling to them, so they got lucky there. He's actually not looked good so far this preseason. He's been moved over the right side, and it looks like he's playing an entirely new position. George Foster, a former offensive lineman, talked about how switching sides is a bigger deal than people realize, and I've never played offensive line, so I'm going to trust him here. So, he's got a lot to learn right now. We'll see how that goes. Carolina was a situation where they could have moved on. I know they traded for Darnold, but that doesn't stop them from drafting Fields. However, they apparently are all in on Darnold, and I hope that works out for them. So they ended up taking Horn, and this is a situation where ESPN was not impressed with the pick, and they spoke ill of Horn and of his father, a former NFL cornerback himself. And so I'm sure the Horn family was pretty pissed at them. Is the pick defensible? I don't think Horn is better than what certainly the haul of picks the Giants got. So trading back again could have been an option, but they have Horn. So Denver was in a situation where they were looking to get Rodgers, and I don't know how viable that was at the time, but I'm going to assume that they were still in talks. So they take Patrick Surtain, who is my number one cornerback on the board. All right. You're not in a situation where, I guess they were in a situation where they could have traded back and tried to get Surtain or someone else later, but they didn't. I don't love their process here, but it is what it is. So Philly did the same thing that Miami did, whereas they traded back for more picks, and then they traded up to grab their wide receiver. I don't know if they consider Hurts to be their quarterback of the future, but they're going to give him a shot to succeed. Hurts was actually pretty bad last year. He was just such a breath of fresh air after how much Wentz sucked. Mm-hmm. So they got Devonta Smith. I hope Smith stays healthy. And then we have Chicago. So after the Giants were sniped for Smith, they still had their hearts set on wide receiver. And they were willing to trade back with Chicago with the first time Gettleman has traded back. And I was very happy with their haul. And Chicago is very happy to get Fields. They've got their quarterback, potential franchise quarterback of the future. And the Giants got picks. Win-win as far as I'm concerned. Dallas, they had wanted to grab a cornerback. Once those were sniped with them, they were willing to trade with Philadelphia. And then they picked up their next best defensive player on the board, Micah Parsons. They knew they needed to fix their defense. Their defense was awful. So they went heavy on defense, and they grabbed the best defensive player available. All right, I get that. That's reasonable. The Chargers were very happy to get Slayton, have him fall to them. Just loading up. Where do I have the entire draft? I have it somewhere on the sheet. So next up, we have... yes, the Jets traded with the Vikings. Yeah, that sucked. Now, there's a legitimate question of whether or not it's worth grabbing a guard there. There have only been like 4 guards taken in the first round of the past 8 years. There are very, very few guards who are worth first round consideration. This is one of them. He was awesome. He looks like a future great professional. So it's certainly possible that he's going to be worth it at the pick there. Which is to say, had the Jets just naturally had the 14th pick, I wouldn't have complained about them taking Vera Tucker there. The trade up was just terrible. I'm so sorry. And so the Vikings, they not only did they win the trade, but they ended up getting another elite offensive lineman with the 23rd pick, I think Darisaw. So just good times all around for the Vikings and bad times all around for New York. But they do want to protect their franchise quarterback. So I get it.
Yep.
So then we have Mac Jones. He fell all the way from 3 to 15. Thank you, Mr. Jones. And he's sitting behind a former MVP with a Super Bowl appearance, so we might not see Jones for a while. Hold on a second. I'm getting a tap in my ear. And, apparently he will be starting week 1. They have waived their former quarterback.
Yes.
I'm blanking on his name. What's his name? The guy who would refuse to get vaccinated. Carolina. Yeah. I am so bad at names.
Mr. Newton, Fig Newton. Cam.
Yes, Cam Newton. Thank you.
Cam.
Yes. Cam Newton is gone. Jones will be starting that. So Jones, Saban and Belichick are actually very tight with each other. And so I'm sure Belichick knows everything there is to know about Jones at this point. And he's going to put him in a reasonable situation to succeed, but he's still a rookie quarterback making the jump to the NFL. So they're a dark horse to win the division. They have a decent roster. They've rebuilt over the last year. But he's a rookie. He is very accurate. He put that skill on display. He does not necessarily have an NFL quality arm. So I'll be looking for him. To be honest, it's nothing personal, Mr. Jones. I hope you fail because I hate your franchise. So they've got a shot, though. It was a very good pick. It was good of them not to trade up to try and get anything. That was where he should have gone to get a good value. So good for the Patriots, bad for the Jets. Arizona, very interesting pick with Zaven Collins. He's our second off-ball linebacker already taken. We haven't had an edge taken yet, which is interesting given the positional values. He's very oversized for the position. Arizona is doing this weird thing where they have some really big and fairly athletic linebackers off the ball, and we've never really seen anything like it before. So it's a grand experiment. I look forward to watching how it works out. Vegas, they took Landon Collins. The pick was nuts. No one expected him to go in the first round, certainly not this early in it. So yeah, Oakland does what Oakland does. Vegas, baby. Miami, the 18th pick. This was the first edge going off the board. It's a weak edge class. This was a fine place for the first one to go. Washington football team took our third off-ball linebacker, Jamin Davis. So I'm going to have to rebuild my linebacker grading system because it's not 1975 anymore. It's all about speed and coverage ability. So, this is a reasonable pick given what he offers them. Huge upside. All right, so now we have the Giants. I loved they traded back. I did not love the fact that they were fixated on grabbing a wide receiver. I don't think that was the best value here. They took, I think, Kadarius Toney. That pick has grown on me a little bit because I like Toney, and I hope he works out well with Jones, but I don't love the process, even though they did trade back. So here we have the Colts. They took the second edge off the board. Again, reasonable place for that to go. Tennessee, they took the third cornerback. Again, reasonable. Farley, the guy that took Caleb Farley, has not looked good so far this preseason. So we'll see how that goes. Then we have the Vikings. They grabbed Darisaw after trading back. Just straight value for the Vikings. Whatever. 24, the Steelers, they took a running back. Always a good decision. The Jaguars took running back too. Again, you can't go wrong with elite running backs. I hope Bobby Fischer wins his match in Iceland later this year against Spassky. In any event, yeah, it's not 1972 anymore. Running back should not be going in the first round. They certainly shouldn't be going off back-to-back in the first round. Whatever. Analytics. Who needs them? The Browns took the fourth cornerback. This pick actually was from the Jalen Ramsey trade. So the Rams, they themselves don't mind giving up picks for guys who can play. Hopefully the Browns get someone as good as Ramsey. We'll see. The Ravens took wide receiver 5. What was his name? Bateman. I think Rashad Bateman. So good for the Ravens. Seems fine. The Saints took Peyton Turner. Now, I love Peyton Turner, but he's also my 91st graded player in the draft. So while I loved him, I did not think he was a first-round value. The Saints are actually a pretty goofy franchise. A little bit of Raiders in them. The Packers felt a bit early for Stokes. He's a very, very fast cornerback. So they knew what they wanted, they knew what they valued, and they got it. Buffalo, they also took an edge. They like edges who have produced a lot in college. They are less influenced by, say, the combine than other teams and more influenced by the film. So that just is their style. I hope this works out. Now, then we have the Ravens. They grabbed an elite athlete, Jason Owa. This pick came over in the Kansas City trade for left tackle Orlando Brown. I thought it was very interesting that two rivals would be willing to trade with each other, but these are both fairly rational franchises, or at least particularly Baltimore is. So good for them. Tampa Bay took Joe Tryon. Now, I did not like his film in Washington. He opted out for 2020. He's a trendy pick for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I don't like his film. I don't think he's going to be that guy. We'll see. But yeah, it was an interesting first round. So now you have your quarterbacks question.
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to tweak this question a little bit because when I worded it, I was in my head, I wasn't wording it the way I wanted to. So like as far as like the first round quarterbacks, I guess what I should say, what I meant to ask is, which one do you think is like the best fit for like the team that drafted them?
Trey Lance.
What's that?
Trey Lance, just straight up Trey
Okay.
Lance.
Okay, so that's a pretty quick answer
he's
there.
being paired with a coach who's open-minded and adaptable and will use his strengths to the best of his ability. That is a great situation to be in. And also his roster is just stacked. The 49ers are a well-built roster at this point. But he's also coming up from Division 2, and he didn't play much in the last year. So it might be a little while before he's ready to start doing damage in the NFL. And that shouldn't damage your view of him in the future. It just means it's hard. It's hard to jump into the NFL from D2. So let's cut him a little slack right now. I think he's in a great spot long term. There's a question later in the mailbag about his MVP prospects. I'm in love with them for 2022. But this year, he's still a rookie coming from D2, so it might take a while.
Okay.
So the other 4 spots, so we have Trevor Lawrence, who was the guy everyone wanted, but he's in Jacksonville, and Jacksonville is not necessarily a great spot. They're not a great franchise. So while he may be the best of all the quarterbacks coming to the NFL, it does not mean he's in the best position to succeed because your franchise matters, your roster matters. So good luck in Jacksonville. The Jets, as we all know, they've not played a home playoff game since January 4th, 2003. That was Chad Pennington. It has been a long dry spell. They are not a well-run organization. Hopefully the new guys they brought in, the new coaches and such, will help Wilson be prepared for the NFL. But you saw with the trade up in the first round, they just don't make good decisions, which is why their rosters start for talent. They gave up 3 second-round picks to trade up for Darnold a few years ago, and he was awful for them. Do we know if that's all Darnold's fault? It might not be, because he was not necessarily put in position to succeed because, again, poorly run franchise. So good luck, Mr. Wilson. Now we have Fields, who went to Chicago. They are in at least a better spot than, say, the Jets or Jags are in. they have a decent roster. I don't know if they've got a lot of skill talent on offense for Fields to work with, but I mean, he's not doomed. I mean, it's been a long time since Chicago has put together a great quarterback, but there's hope for Fields, and I don't think the situation is all that bad. And then we have Mac Jones. He went to New England. Well, New England, they've won a lot of championships the last few years. Their roster had to be rebuilt, but they still have Bill Belichick. He's in a good situation, but he's also the least talented of the 5 quarterbacks. So I don't expect them to be elite anytime in the next few years, but he's got a shot. So I think he's in the second best situation. I think Fields is in the third best situation. I think Lance is in the best situation, but he's also got the biggest jump to make.
Yep. Okay. And then the last question of the draft topic. I mean, if you see Lynch or Shanahan come to New York for a game, I'm guessing you're going to have to
Let me
buy
put it
them
this
a
way:
drink.
it's beyond a drink. I would take them out to the steakhouse of their choice.
Okay.
That's how happy I was with that.
Okay. I was going to say, because I remember how much you told me you threw on that prop. So
that was a very, very good night. It made the rest of the draft very enjoyable,
nice.
Despite what the Jets did. So yeah. Now it wasn't necessarily their fault that Mac Jones, like it could have been disinformation from them or from another franchise. I don't necessarily know where the Mac Jones rumors came from. I just called bullshit on them.
Yeah, and it paid off.
So it did.
I guess that's why they probably have. I don't know what book you bet through, but I'm guessing the limits on these are probably not as high as they could be for shit like that. Because
there was two-way action on the number 3 overall pick. It was a very exciting. Like there were 3 different guys who were being talked about between Jones, Lance, and Fields, and action was coming in. And if you're getting like 2-way or in this case 3-way action, it makes the books more comfortable.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I threw in a random topic here because I've always been fascinated by like how teams manipulate the salary cap, and I figured that you might have, at least being an NFL guy, some knowledge on maybe some advanced knowledge that I might not know, or like you've read some things based on like what you've shared with me, but presuming that people didn't read some of these things that you share with me. First question I had to ask about salary cap was, how much does it matter? Because I feel like a lot of times you see teams that are like supposedly struggling with the cap, and then magically they're able to like sign some guy, and it's they're doing some like tricks, and they're doing some financial tricks, and so how much does it actually matter on the salary cap?
So let's talk about the scenario you just mentioned. You have a team that's up against the salary cap, and suddenly they find a way to sign a star player. Well, how'd they do it? So what they may have done in that situation is take some other players in the roster, convert some of their current salary into a bonus, which will then spread that money out prorated over the length of the contract. I believe it's the remaining years of the contract. And that way you now have some salary cap space to sign the new guy. And for signing the new player, you might also do some shenanigans. There's a thing called void years. And if you're listening to this and you want to know about void years, just Google it. You're going to have to see it for yourself. No one can be told what void years are. You have to experience them. So void years allow a contract to have some shenanigans, and then you'll eat those shenanigans in a later year once the player is no longer on your roster. So then in terms of just how much does the salary cap matter, for any given year, you could do shenanigans. You could move stuff. You could have rolled over money from previous years and then defer future money into later years and go all in 1 year. Or you could try to build yourself up to have a few years where you compete, and then you're going to have to crash and burn and purge your roster. There are a variety of things you can do, and different front offices have different philosophies. When you post this to YouTube, there's a link I have near the bottom to about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and how
Okay.
they run their salary cap, and it's a really good article. I recommend it for just learning about what your various salary cap options are and different ideas on how you want to run it. And from an organization, I think that does a good job with their salary cap.
Okay. If I forget to add that, let me know. But I'll
I
look
will.
to add that to like the description of the video.
So you have the options. You can front load contracts. Front loading contracts involves a certain amount of risk where players may be happy in the first few years and then hold out later once they're no longer getting what they view as a commensurate market rate for their services. Also, players can get hurt and lose a step, and that in the case you've kind of prepaid that contract and now they're hurt, and well, you're kind of left holding the bag. Whereas in the other situation, had you not prepaid, had you not front loaded the deal, they could have been backloaded, and then you could simply cut them and not pay those back years. So there are risks involved in that. Then there's the roster bonuses. So there's a difference between a roster bonus and a signing bonus, where a roster bonus counts against only the year that it's paid, and it doesn't count against future years, whereas a signing bonus is prorated. So the Bucks, and one example I just gave, they don't mind roster bonuses. You want a lot of guaranteed money right now. All right, let's pay it out right now and have our salary cap kept free from future years so we don't deal with the scourge of dead money, which is something that makes it a lot harder for teams to build the roster when they have their teams this year, which have close to $50 million in dead money. It puts them at a disadvantage relative to their opposition. So we'll talk more about this in a bit. Your next question about good teams versus bad teams.
Yeah. So the next question here is relating to what the best / smartest teams do in terms of cap management that maybe the less financially savvy teams either don't do or refuse to do, ignore completely. I know you got some things here, so however you want to present it.
So before I get into, I do have a fair amount of notes here. I just want to ask, what brought the salary cap to the forefront of your mind? Was there a specific signing or a specific move?
I think it's for me, like it's always been a fascinating topic, and I feel like a lot of people have misconceptions about finances behind NFL, because like they'll see like this big contract, like Mahomes signing this, fat ass deal, and then it's like, the odds of him like actually seeing all of that money are like zero, and like I don't feel like a lot of people like know like the ins and outs of like how teams like, I wouldn't say fudge numbers, but how they like will end up like not paying like even nearly the salary that they actually signed to. It's just like, they ESPN will flash something on the bottom line, Mahomes $500 million deal. Well, he's not going to see all of that money. I mean, at least in the terms of the contract that's laid out, like they're going to eventually at some point do some, wiggling around with money. And I guess that's kind of where I got this idea of like talking about the salary cap, because it's like, I just was curious to see like, from somebody who has studied football a lot more intensely than I have, like how it worked. Because it's just the finances behind it are interesting to me, because I know for a fact that hardly any of these guys, especially since they're not guaranteed contracts, will never see all the money that like is in that 3-year $12 million deal. Like it'll, because only so much of it's guaranteed, and that's pretty much all you could say that they're going to get for sure in many cases.
Okay, so let's create a hypothetical, just imaginary contract, 4 years, $48 million, with a $2 million salary for the first year and a $10 million roster bonus. And the second year, same thing, another $2 million salary, another $10 million roster bonus. And then the final 2 years have $12 million salaries.
Okay.
So we can think of that contract as a contract with, all right, you have 10 million is immediately guaranteed. And the second year is, you're pretty much guaranteed the 12 million, assuming you didn't flame out that first year. But after that, the team can cut you after 2 years with no dead money. That's the kind of stuff the Buccaneers try to do in their contracts. And you have a situation where you could view that as a 1 year, $12 million deal. You can view that as a 2 year, $24 million deal, but it's not really a 4 year, $48 million deal.
Right.
Because those last 2 years are pretty speculative. And teams could do a lot of different shenanigans in the later years with, all right, you have a high salary. Good luck seeing you get paid that, which is why they try to lock in guaranteed money. Because that's what they're really going to get in the next years. Maybe let's see how you play.
Yeah.
All right. So now let's actually deal with the cap management questions that you raised. So one thing good teams do is they don't invest heavily in low value positions. Just, the Patriots are famous for this. When these positions are going to be worth on top of this % of our salary cap, and they weight various positions in certain high value positions, get a lot more of their cap than others. So you don't want to invest in low value positions. If you're paying a lot for running backs, for defensive tackles, for off ball linebackers, you may have put yourself in a bit of a hole. Now, there are some exceptions. If your defensive tackles are guys who can get to the quarterback, then they produce the same kind of value that an edge would produce. And so that's fine. If you have a linebacker who can cover like an elite safety and he still hits like a linebacker, well, that guy will again produce a real amount of value for your defense. He's providing value in the passing game, still doing his daily linebacker job. Good for him. That's a guy. These are rare creatures, though. The defensive tackle that gets the quarterback and the linebacker who runs like a gazelle.
Right.
And running backs, even if they're great right now, they age like milk. So if you're going to pay these guys in a second deal, those future years are pretty speculative. Good luck.
Yeah, and so sorry to interrupt, but like one of the things with I know you don't play fantasy football, but one of the things that I will do in fantasy football is if I do have like a good running back, I'll try to trade him like a year before he sucks. It's like I have Dalvin Cook, so it's like he's a guy that like, yeah, he's a great running back, but like, you know, like you said, these guys just like fall off of a hill just so fast. So it's like, you know, it doesn't make sense to invest much in them, even from a fantasy football perspective.
That's kind of funny. It's dark, but it's funny.
Yeah.
So historically, teams with long-term plans, they're willing to accept roster turnover because it means that you can't keep all your guys. Because once they suddenly demand market rates, well, goodbye. We have the next guy in waiting, next man up, and that's actually the name of a book. It was written about the Baltimore Ravens. And it's a bit dated, but it gives you a sense of the kind of roster turnover of just a new guy's going to be playing next week because this guy's hurt or whatever else. It's how the league works. It's a tough business. And it is a business. So you just have to be willing to say goodbye to guys. So one of the things we've seen with the new CBA is, and this was a measurable effect, like the average age on a normal roster, it got younger directly due to the new CBA. Because older guys, they had higher veteran minimums. They kept the rookies cheap because rookies, well, they don't really have much representation within the union, so they get sold out. But that means it's a lot easier for them to make a roster when they are now cheaper than the comparable veterans they're competing against. So that is the yin and the yang of screwing the rookies. So next thing, well, let's see. We've seen one of the things we've seen is a willingness to chase rings, and even smart teams, even disciplined teams will know. All right, this is our window. We're going to try to win now, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But we're taking our shot, and we're going to pay the piper 2022, 2023, whatever it is. Whenever the bill comes due, we're going to suck then, and we know we're going to suck then. But that's our plan. We're going to try to make hay when the winning's good. The Patriots, they actually went through that last year when they knew they were going to be bad. They didn't know they were going to be that bad. They didn't know that everyone was going to opt out. That may have been a situation where Bill talked to his linebackers or whatever else and said, hey, now's the time to rest up, boys. And their salary cap is now back under control. This is where things are going to get a little complicated. So there's a thing in the current CBA, and this didn't used to exist, where teams could roll over unspent money. One of the things teams used to do is they would say, put their backup quarterback, Kitty. They'd give their backup quarterback an incentive where, hey, if in the final game of the season you throw for X hundreds of yards and X touchdowns, we're going to give you a $20 million bonus. And it was surprisingly kosher, and league rules would say, all right, he didn't make that bonus. You now give a $20 million credit to your next year's salary cap. And that's what teams used to do to roll over unspent money. And now you can simply just not spend it and roll it over. And I don't know if it's on like a 3 or 4 year rolling basis, where you can't spend more than X and you have to spend a certain minimum. But for any given year, you could do tremendous shenanigans. So dead money is a big deal. And let me give you some examples from the season. So we have on one end, we have the Indianapolis Colts, where they were able to roll over, I think, $8.3 million. So they're spending $186.5 million right now. They have the lowest amount of dead money in the league, $566K, and they have $3.2 million in cap space. So unfortunately, their quarterbacks are Wentz and Eason, but otherwise they put themselves in a good position to compete this year. On the other end, you have a team like the Carolina Panthers, who are spending $108.2 million. They have $45.8 million of dead money and $22 million in cap space. I believe they currently are spending the least in the league. That $182.2 is not a lot of money to spend on your roster.
Right.
But again, they got a shitload of dead money. The Lions and Eagles have almost $50 million in dead money apiece. So that puts them behind the 8 ball. Then we have the Dallas Cowboys, who are spending $193 million, and they got $12 million of dead money, $4 million of cap space. So they rolled over a fair amount to try and compete this year, and now they've got a quarterback who may have a bum shoulder. So we'll see how that goes. And then we have the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns, in some ways, they tried to be the Houston Rockets or the Philadelphia 76ers of the NFL, under a guy by the name of Sashi Brown. And Sashi Brown, he read the CBA. He was like, I could roll over how much money and I could keep doing it. So the Browns did this thing where they would roll over a shitload of money and then try to, in a variety of ways, turn that money into picks through various trades, whatever else. The most famous being the Osweiler trade. And so they accumulated a ton of picks and a ton of draft capital and a ton of cap space, which is a neat trick to pull off both at the same time. Unfortunately for Sashi, his drafting skills weren't necessarily, and his roster construction skills weren't necessarily up to snuff, and so he got fired. He was replaced by a guy by the name of John Dorsey. So John Dorsey, an old school NFL guy, he came over, I believe, from the Chiefs. He's like, all right, I'm old school. I know how to build a roster. He suddenly has all this cap space and all this salary cap space and all these picks. And the first few picks, they looked good and they actually turned out well. But John Dorsey being John Dorsey, most of his later picks did not work out. And he used up a lot of salary cap space on veterans who weren't necessarily worth what he spent on him. And he ended up working his way out of town in 2 years. He gave Freddie Kitchens the keys. Bad decision. And so he was replaced by a guy by the name of Andrew Berry. And Berry, he must have learned a lot from Sashi Brown because he does a lot of the same salary cap management tricks that Brown used. So the Saints and the Browns tried to do a really neat trick where it was a sign and trade, which is allowed under the NBA. Not really something the NFL has ever done, where the Browns would sign Jadeveon Clowney and trade him to the Saints for a player and a draft pick. And initially the NFL was like, all right, I guess that would work. And then after they had a discussion overnight, they came back and said, nah. And the reasoning being is you're not allowed to trade picks for cash or picks for draft space under league rules. And they felt that was what this trade effectively was, despite the fact it was technically a player going for a player and a pick. Which now makes us wonder, would the Osweiler trade fly today? And we have no real way of knowing until another team tries something like it. The league rules are surprisingly gray. It leaves the league office a amount of freedom to decide whether or not, when they see something for the first time, whether or not they'll allow it or not. And last time they did, and this time they didn't. So, but the Browns themselves, they have a shitload of money available for this year. I think it's $211 million, which leads the league. So yeah, you can roll over cap space.
Okay.
So the Steelers last year, they, I believe, spent $138 million, which I believe is well below the league average you have to spend. But again, it's a 3 to 4 year thing. So they're going to be able to spend it, either they spent it before or they spend it in future years. And now they have a developing situation with TJ Watt, who he wants a new deal. He's in the 5th year option year, I believe. And so they're negotiating with him. He wants a lot of guaranteed money. They're saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, they're saying, trust us. We're the Steelers organization. Our word is good. And maybe wants it in writing or wants it guaranteed. So he's been kind of holding out. He's been there. He's been in meetings, but not putting on the pads and practicing. So this is going to be a developing situation. We'll see what happens this week. It's very exciting.
Okay. And then yeah, you have the link. I'll add that link to the description about the Buccaneers and their salary cap situation.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Well,
questions.
I appreciate that insight on the salary cap, because, like I said, I didn't really have much. I guess I could have looked up that story myself, but I guess sometimes I don't really know what to look for. So so that did help.
And again, let me reiterate this to the listeners: Google void years, because I cannot believe this is allowed in the CBA. It's amazing.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just it seems so manipulative. Like
it is. It's the kind of thing where, like, okay, we know you're going to do shenanigans, so let's legalize it. I'm like,
yeah,
really?
legalized shenanigans.
Yep.
Okay, so so I did want to touch base on I guess there was only one there's 2 topics revisiting last year. So the first one, it was obviously the biggest surprise of the season in terms of a player progression, given the status of the position itself, quarterback. Josh Allen, I think a lot of people were surprised by the big jump. Like, maybe people were expecting progress, but not to the point where you could consider him a top 2 or 3 quarterback. So the question that I had, because I follow a lot of Bills Mafia, and they're obviously in love with Mr. Allen for good reason, but it brings up the question, at least in my head, in terms of who or what is responsible for the big jump that Allen made. He obviously had Diggs come on board last year. I don't know if there was anything in terms of the coaching or scheme or anything that changed, from 2019 to 2020. But you have a little list here of the factors that you think contributed to his jump.
So let me just first say, the Bills are a very well-run franchise. There are a lot of franchises that are stuck in the Stone Age or worse. The Bills are not one of them. They do a lot of things that are very progressive, and Allen went to the right organization for him to succeed. So good for the Bills and good for Allen. So you asked the question, what helped him jump? The big thing, the one thing that I could spot on film is his better mechanics. Just, you could see this was a guy, you look at his college film and look at him last year. This is a quarterback who got rid of all the wasted motion from his throwing motion and his footwork. Just, he is now a very streamlined and textbook delivery. So good for him. His decision making has improved. And this comes from coaching. This comes from him watching film, the team preparing him. But when you watch the game, you see the situation where he's got to make a decision pretty quickly, see who's going to be open against this defense. He makes good decisions quickly. And both things are important. You have to make a good decision, and you have to make it in time for that decision to matter. And he's doing that. So kudos to him there. Just, he he's made a lot of leaps in his development from the guy he was in college. So kudos to him and kudos to the Bills. And yes, there is great coaching. The Bills have put him in a position to succeed. They've called passing plays on neutral downs where he's not necessarily always facing dime defenses or nickel defenses where they're sitting back and trying to take away the passing game. The Bills have been very, very aggressive about not calling running plays just for the sake of calling running plays. They did that to Seattle's. Where it's like, okay, you're going to play us straight up? Well, we're not going to play you straight up, so good luck with that. And then you brought up Diggs. Diggs is one of, if not the best receiver in the NFL. It's not necessarily obvious who the best is, but he's on the very, very, very short list.
Okay.
Adding him to the roster was a big freaking deal. So yes, Allen has done a lot of stuff himself, but adding Diggs helped a lot as well. Now, having said all of this, teams adapt. They watch what you did well last year, and next year they try to take that away. That's what the NFL does. It's what teams do in the offseason. And so he's going to be facing teams that might no longer play them straight up against the run. He might be facing base nickel or base dime a lot of the time. And now you're going to have to decide, all right, do I want to throw against this? Or are we going to try to run against this? And I bring up Arizona here because they had a pretty clever offense, very high paced, a situation where they were beating teams with speed, not just in the passing game, but also in the running game with their quarterback, Blake on his name again, because I'm terrible with names, but teams then adjusted them by putting a lot of speed on the field against them and saying, all right, if you want to try and beat us with power, but I don't think you will, and I don't think you can. And they really didn't. Their offense stagnated later in the season when teams were taking away what they wanted to do. So that's what the Bills will face this year. They're going to face defenses built to stop what they succeeded in last year. Now, that's not just because you're trying to stop them doesn't mean you can. Allen is still really good. Diggs is still really good. And the Buffalo coaching staff is still really good. So I still think he can succeed, but it's going to be harder.
Okay. And then the last question, I guess this was just this wasn't really necessarily related to like anything specific in the NFL, but in terms of your viewing of the game or data gathering that's changed for the better, worse, was there anything like last year that you could say that, either your viewing of the game or data gathering that like changed, and then like anything you could apply to your betting this year?
So last year I was very, very happy I had so much data that I wasn't expecting to have, and I was able to watch the game. Just in terms of having access to the data, I was very, very happy with my ability to access the data. That was great. In terms of things changed, I'm not sure I have made a lot of changes. I have certainly tweaked some things and how much certain things matter. But I wouldn't say I've made any sea changes.
Okay.
But one of the things you mentioned about applying to my betting, well, there's a lot of statistics, a lot of advanced analytic stuff that has been coming up. Like one of the things is CPOE, which is passing over expectation. I think it's completed passes over expectation. It's a percentage thing where someone making the same throws as you, what percentage would we expect them to complete, and what percentage did you complete? And it's ostensibly a measure of accuracy. And in that, it is not a bad statistic. The problem is it's not really a good statistic either because it's missing a lot of relevant information. And you'll see Patrick Mahomes, he generally doesn't do great by this statistic because a lot of his wide receivers are open. And, well, do you punish him for that? I certainly would not, because one of the reasons they're open is he's capable of making throws to a lot of receivers all over the field, which stretches the defense and puts them in a tough spot. Also, he throws on time, and he makes good decisions. So he throws to guys when they're open, where they're open, and he's part of the reason why they are open. And so a stat like CPOE, if people are using that to go into the markets and by my expectation from what I've seen, it actually does have a non-negligible market effect, which makes me very happy. So one of these statistics that are coming out, a lot of these things, they do answer a question that you're asking, but don't necessarily answer the question that you meant or thought you were asking. And when these stats move markets, I am very, very happy to take the other side.
Sure.
And they do move markets, and
and you don't want to tip off any edge.
No.
So you don't.
No, I do not want to tip off any edge here. I will mention CPO just because it's one that I have mocked publicly before. But yes, there are also a lot of good sixes coming out, which I also won't talk about.
Sure.
And some move markets, and some of them don't, which makes me very happy when I find a statistic where people have done some great research where that is interesting. That's something I've never thought about. Let's measure this. Let's look at it historically, and let's see if it has a statistical effect on the lines. And sometimes I find them where they don't have a statistical effect on the lines, but they should, and those are gems. There aren't a lot of those, and the ones that do exist don't necessarily have a huge edge in the market, but everything counts. Yeah. Everything counts. Everything matters, which is, again, why CPOA isn't necessarily great compared to what people think it is. Everything matters.
Sure. Okay. All right, well, let's jump into 2021 finally in terms of the season itself. We did talk about the draft, but the 2021 topic. So the first part I had here was relating to anything in the offseason that changed, like whether it be less of a preseason, any particular rule changes, what have you, that caught your eye or made you prepare any differently than you normally would entering a football season.
So there were a couple points of emphasis that the NFL brought up, and one of them was taunting penalties, and one of them was blocks outside of the tackle box, on the outside. I think it's a tackle box. I'm not entirely sure, but so the first one, taunting, they saw that in the preseason. They received a lot of derision on social media, and I think they realized pretty quickly that they have an idea that they want to implement it, but it's not ready yet. And I think they're going to put this one back in the box because I don't think it's in the league's best interests to go heavy on the taunting penalties. The next one is blocks below the waist outside of the box. Now, I have not changed any weights or grades yet because of this, but I know, at least I expect to during the season, because this is going to affect games. We're going to see penalties that would not have been penalties the year before that will affect who wins or who covers. So I'm going to have to see it in action, see which teams benefit from this and which teams might not. Right now, it's something I know that I will have to take into account going forward.
Okay. And then as far as this year goes, with this being, I guess like normal is kind of a weird word these days to use, but is there a particular group of people, new coaches, new quarterbacks, groups on offense or defense that you feel will benefit from a somewhat normal offseason compared to last year? Because I know last year was, this year feels a little bit normal, but I guess it's kind of just an extension of last year with maybe somewhat the benefit of vaccines, but the virus is still running rampant. So who or what do you think benefited from I guess a normal off season?
So let's talk about, you just brought up the benefits of vaccines. So let's talk about the yin and the yang of the Dallas Cowboys. Okay. So last year, the Dallas Cowboys were tremendously unprepared because Coach McCarthy, he is not one of the more tech-savvy guys, and he didn't necessarily know how to prepare a team when you couldn't get everyone together and talk things through. And so early in the season, for the first half of the season, their defense, it wasn't just a lack of talent, although there was a lack of talent. They were also just getting out-coached left and right. And that's on the coaching staff and on McCarthy. So I figured they would benefit this year from being better prepared. But then you mentioned again vaccines. So apparently, around 92% of the league is vaccinated, and roughly 8% isn't. Um, and that 8% is, I believe, doing a disservice to their teammates, if not themselves and their family, um, by not getting vaccinated. And we have a situation where Zach Martin, the star right guard of the Dallas Cowboys, will not be available week 1. Now, my apologies to him if he is vaccinated, but from what I understood, he was not, and which is why he will not be available. So, that being fully vaccinated, having your team fully vaccinated, I believe will in fact be a competitive advantage this year that certain teams will benefit from and other teams won't. So.
Okay. All right. So yeah, you did cover that. Yeah, you did combine the two questions there. So yeah, that was the competitive advantage that I was speaking of. So I guess we're
Yes,
seeing
there
it to
will in
some
fact be a
degree.
competitive advantage to the more vaccinated teams.
So I mean, and I was actually surprised at the high number. Like I was talking with, I was at my parents yesterday, and you know we were somehow the topic NFL came up, and I was mentioning like I was shocked at like how much like higher the percentages of NFL players is compared to like the national average. And I don't know if I don't know if by sport if NFL is the most vaccinated. I don't even know if there's statistics on that, but that's pretty damn high.
So I'm stealing this from Simply Digs again, but there's this 8% of the NFL that's not going to vaccinate. And that might just be the baseline of people who just will not get vaccinated no matter how strong the incentives you put in front of them. Because NFL players have been given some fairly strong incentives to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
I mean, the league's been rather heavy-handed about this, which is a move I agree with. And yeah, we're still at 8% who just, for whatever reason, haven't gotten the shot. And yes, it is a competitive advantage. And Cam Newton, when he was cut, that raised a lot of eyebrows around the league. And I think there's certain players who saw that and said, oh, shit, Cam Newton can get cut. I can too. And I think certain players have gotten vaccinated in response to that.
Although I mean, I guess if you looked at the way Newton played last year, I don't know like how much that played into it. But like, I guess when you're like, you know, a borderline player, and you know that's one of the evaluation points.
You
You
can
know,
never
it's
really know with Bill. I mean, it could be a situation where he could have been vaccinated and Bill said, all right, you don't have a shoulder. I don't want the kid looking over his shoulder. If he makes a bad throw, word that I'm going to bench him for you. So thanks for coming and good luck.
yeah,
Or it could have been a situation where he would have wanted Jones to sit behind Newton for a few weeks, just let him develop, get used to the speed of the NFL. We'll never really know. But again, he wasn't vaccinated, and then he got cut. We don't know if that was the cause and effect there. We can only speculate.
yep. Okay, so let's go into the preview by division. We're starting with the NFC, or AFC. So we'll go northeast, west, south. I think is how I have it lined up here. So if you want to just like read your bullet points on each team
Sure.
that you have here.
So in the case of Baltimore, it's time for Lamar Jackson to diversify his game. We've seen defenses have adapted to what the Ravens have done well, and they're still a good team. They still are going to win more games than lose, most likely. But they can take the next step if he can start taking what the defense is giving them, and that's the mid to deep ball. From his college film, I feel like he has that club in his bag. I feel like he should be able to do this. They have a strong roster, and they get the Chiefs at home, so they have a shot to grab the number 1 seed in the AFC. We shall see. Cincinnati, they're a team that is cursed by poor, cheap ownership. They have a talent-starved roster. They do have a young QB and a trio of receivers, pretty good receivers, so at least they're going to be fun to watch. Hopefully Burrow doesn't go down again. Fingers crossed for that offensive line. Cleveland is building something sustainable. I like a lot of what they've done on their roster construction. They are considered one of the sharp analytics franchises in the NFL, and I think that's borne out by a lot of decisions they've made, a lot of the moves they made. Their one problem is they're in a strong division. They have a strong roster. Baltimore has a stronger roster, and Cleveland may take a step back this year simply because football is tough. So we shall see. Pittsburgh, Ben got old. More than anything else, Ben got old. They went 12-4 last year, despite him being the corpse of Ben Roethlisberger, and now he's even a year older. TJ Watt might hold out. I don't know. If he's back, the defense looks stout still, although the secondary isn't as strong as it was previously. And yes, again, Ben is washed. So that is their problem. Now for the AFC East, Buffalo, can they keep it going? Last year, they kind of broke out. Good for them. Allen took another leap. This year, teams will be better prepared to stop what worked for them. And as a scheduling quirk, unfortunately, they face the Chiefs in Kansas City, which means it'll be very hard for them to get the number 1 seed. Weird thing about the AFC East, I believe this is the first time in NFL history where every quarterback, I think it's like 24 and younger. So a lot of young quarterbacks in the division. For Miami, it's all on Tua. Last year he was hurt. He's splitting time with Fitzpatrick. So now is the time for Tua to shine. They gave him Waddle. They've given him a new weapon. He should be healthier and better prepared. So let's hope he plays better. That's all that really matters for Miami this season.
Yep.
For New England, they're a dark horse to take back the AFC East crown. They do have one of the more prepared quarterbacks. Even if he doesn't have a high ceiling, he at least should have a high floor. And Bill Belichick, he will have him reasonably prepared. He is still a rookie. Rookies struggle. Even rookies from Alabama. So that's the story in New England. The Jets, they lost Carl Lawson before the season. And I expect just things to get worse from there because they are the Jets. Again, there's a reason they have not hosted a home playoff game since 2003. AFC West, Denver actually is remarkably confident for a team that people may think of as a bottom feeder. They really aren't.
So not to cut, sorry to cut him, but I did.
No, please cut ahead and whatever you want.
Oh yeah, so yeah, I was really happy that Denver made the choice to play Bridgewater because at least it gives them a chance to be a competent team that maybe has a chance to sneak into the playoff.
So this is a little personal for me. So I was very happy to see them acquire Bridgewater and not start Locke. So Locke, in 2019, we saw him in a small sample. It was exciting. I think he went 4-1. He was taking a lot of risks, but they paid off for him. And then last year, we saw a much larger sample, and he was not very accurate. So bringing Bridgewater should help the team. Particularly should help first-round pick Jerry Jeudy. So you might remember the name Laquan Treadwell. He was my number 1 wide receiver in I think, the 2017 draft, and he just washed out of Minnesota. And last year, Jerry Jeudy, yes, a lot of the throws to him weren't accurate, but also, yes, he dropped a shitload of them. And that's on him. Hopefully this year when he works with Bridgewater, both he and Bridgewater will have nice seasons, and I won't have 2 of my first overall wide receivers shit the bed. That would be fairly embarrassing for me. So I'll be rooting for Jeudy there. Also, they get Von Miller back, which will help their defense be a lot better than it was last year. So Denver, they're a real team. Kansas City, they still have Mahomes. Every team they face does not have Mahomes. So that's advantage Kansas City. They've rebuilt their offensive line after effectively costing the Super Bowl. Also, their defense cost them the Super Bowl. The defense got their butt kicked. So they are still the AFC favorites. They're still the Super Bowl favorites. And we'll talk about my choice to win the Super Bowl later in the podcast. In Las Vegas, Carr doesn't get much respect. He's kind of like Johnny Dangerfield, Roddy Dangerfield, like that. But he's actually pretty good. Their pass rush is weak, which is unfortunate. Al Davis, one of my favorite quotes from him is, "The quarterback must go down, and he must go down hard." Well, they may have forgotten that in Vegas because the quarterback will not be going down. So now we have the Chargers. They went from having, in 2019, the worst special teams in the NFL to last year having possibly the worst special teams in NFL history. It was literally one win worse, like 30 plus points worse. Just they went from being terrible to being something beyond that. It was inconceivable just how bad they were. So if this year they just go back to merely sucking, if they go from suck to blow, that's one win right there. At Herbert, like I was just wrong about him. I expected him to fail in the NFL, and he did not that. So good for Herbert, good for Los Angeles. They now have a new a new coach, new quarterback coach, a guy who worked with Breeze in New Orleans. So he might take the next step, and he might be very, very good. We'll see if he can do the Allen progression where, hey, he's better than I thought, to, holy shit, he's a lot better than I thought. So that's what Herbert's going to try to do. All right, now we have the AFC South. One other thing. The Chargers, they're a bit like Cincinnati West in that they are another very cheap organization, which is part of the reason why they don't necessarily have a deep roster, which may be why the special teams are so bad. They don't fill in the back end of the roster with quality guys. They fill them in with who's ever financially affordable. And that's a problem. All right, back to Houston. Houston, there's a lot of poorly run franchises in the NFL, but Houston might be the single worst, which is a big reason why they're now in pole position to take the number 1 overall pick. That Tunsil trade paid dividends for Miami. So yeah, they are very, very bad, and maybe very bad for a long time, just because bad ownership leads to bad roster construction. And there's a story, if you Google their GM, I don't even know who's the GM, but there's this guy, Jack Easterby, who's basically running the franchise, and he is not necessarily qualified to do so. The word snake oil might be involved. Just Google
Charlatan
him.
Or something.
Exactly. They are not in a good space. In Indianapolis, they have a good roster, but I don't believe in Wentz or Easton, so I think they're kind of screwed. It's unfortunate for them. Jacksonville, now they don't have to tank this year, so they can try to put their best team on the field and win 5 or 6 games, maybe even more. Who knows? I am obviously still mad they sniped the Jets for Trevor Lawrence, but whatever, that's on us for winning 2 games. They are a poorly run organization themselves, and I view Urban Meyer as a disaster in the making. He's already had a few huge pitfalls, and the season hasn't even started yet. So that should be something worth watching. Then you have Tennessee, where it's a soft division, and Tennessee, just by default, being at least competent, they are the one-eyed man in the land of the blind. So they are the favorites in the division. Tennessee should win again, I think, because they have Tannehill and they have a legitimate roster. Derrick Henry is going to get the shit worked out of him again. Probably another 400 touches. But he's good until he's not. So hopefully he's still good this year. Vrabel is Vrabel. He's going to run the ball. All right. I switched up the order for the NFC, so let's start with the East. Everyone's like, the question is, how is Dak's shoulder? And we won't really know until he work it. So it's a thin roster, which kind of makes losing Zach Martin for week 1 not great, Bob. Injuries could easily decimate them because they spend a lot on their stars and not a lot on everyone else. And if the stars goes down by week 17, they will probably be not as strong as they are right now. Although right now being the operative word, missing their right guard. So Zach Martin, they'll probably better week 2 than they'll be week 17. Let's put it that way. The Giants, another poorly run organization. Oh, God. So they've got Jones, who I don't believe in. I don't think adding Tony will help that much. Saquon Barkley is trying to get healthy. Don't take running backs with the second overall pick, boys. I am glad that Gettleman traded back. That's something, but he still should have been fired years ago. So in Philadelphia, again, Hurts was pretty bad last year. I know it felt like, oh my God, at least he's not Wentz. Yeah, we'll see what they have in him this year when he's got a full year offseason to prepare. Their plan, ostensibly, is to give Hurts a shot, and if Hurts doesn't work out, to use a lot of their draft capital next year, where they may have three first round picks to move up and grab their guy. So that is the plan. They've got, it's like a semi bluff. Do they have to trade up? Maybe Hurts works out. They don't have to. So we shall see. And then we have, one other thing. So they had to fire their coach Peterson because last year they tanked the game versus Washington. They did it on national television in Sunday Night Football. And so you saw the players on the sideline try to fight the coach. That normally doesn't happen. And it was clear that Pearson was doing what the management wanted him to do, which was lose. But he lost the locker room, and then they had to fire him. GMs can tank, coaches cannot tank. Players take that personally. That leaves us to Washington, the beneficiary of the tank job. They have a great defense. The real question is, how much Fitzmagic is left? He's not a young man. I think he's like 37. You know what? I've got Google.
Yeah, I know I looked it up, and I know it's like the 9th franchise he's going to start a game for.
Oh, yeah. So he is 38. He will turn 39 in November. Yes, he's been around. He is a veteran. And on his good days, he's great. Like, he's a fun guy to watch.
Yeah.
But he also has really bad days where he throws interceptions that would make Jameis Winston blush. If he puts it together and Dak is hurt, Washington is the favorite to get back to the playoffs. And if he's good and their defense is what it was last year, they could be a problem. All right, Chicago, it's all about building up fields for the future. So why are they starting Dalton week 1? I'm not really sure. But look, they got Fields. That gives them hope.
I figured they would have been outside of like Jacksonville and the Jets the most likely to start the guy that they drafted, especially with, I feel like, the GM and coaches' jobs on the line.
You know what? I mean, they've shown a willingness to make trades. They went for the brass ring a few years ago with Trubisky and trading for, I'm blanking on the name of the linebacker they got from the Raiders, but it was someone.
Yeah, Mac. The thing is, how many? There's not too many GMs that get a chance to draft 2 franchise quarterbacks within 5 years. Like, normally, if that first one fails, they're gone.
Well, I mean, you saw what the Cardinals did when they grabbed Josh Rosen. They realized fairly swiftly that was not going to work out.
Yeah, I guess the earlier you catch it, I guess the more more time you buy for yourself. But I'm just surprised that they started him so long, and everyone was, I guess Fox was fired earlier on in that run, but I don't even know if he wanted Trubisky. But I'm just surprised that Pace lasted a second. Franchise.
I don't think Pace should have not lasted this long. I think Pace also should have been fired years ago for a variety of decisions. But one thing about Trubisky, like, Trubisky wasn't bad. He was merely mediocre, which is fine if you're taking in like the 2nd or 3rd round, but not when you trade up for the, I think it was the 2nd overall pick. And then the 2 guys taken after you are Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I think he'll be a fine like backup quarterback for the rest of his career.
He's in Buffalo, which is, again, a well-run organization. They picked him up on the cheap, which is what he should be picked up for.
Yeah,
he's a mediocre quarterback. He's not a savior. Hopefully, Fields is a savior because that's what he's going to have to be. Detroit is another terribly run franchise. I did laugh that they traded. They had I think it was the 2009 first overall pick, and they traded him for the 2016 first overall pick, if I remember correctly. And they're the ones who picked up a couple other first-round picks in that trade. That's just amazing. And I'm going to wish them best of luck with Jared Goff. I hope they're happy together. They are also a dark horse to snipe the number 1 overall pick from Houston, because if Goff doesn't work out, and he might not, they could truly suck. Green Bay, Rodgers was on a downward path. He was fading. And then they drafted Jordan Love. That made him very, very angry. Rodgers does well with spite, and he had a career year last year. Will that be enough to keep him on the same level for another year? I don't know. We'll find out. As Green Bay turns, we'll watch. Then you have Minnesota. I expect Minnesota to be better than last year. But one really huge concern, their offensive line, it was really bad last year, and then they lost their best player, their left tackle, Riley Riff. Their offensive line could be Chargers special teams level bad. So we're gonna have to wait and see how that works out. Cousins might die. I don't know. We'll find out. In the NFC West, so the Cardinals, if you just look at the division, they have the 49ers who look good. They have the Seahawks who look good. They have the Rams who look good. And then you have the Cardinals who, all right, this is our divisional schedule. This is some bullshit. But what they have to do is they've got to retool their offense to adjust what defenses were doing against last year, which is putting dime out there, putting speed out there. They've got to adjust. The traditional answer, again, is you bring out speed in the defense, you're going to go undersized, we're going to go power, we're going to run the ball down your throat. We'll see if the Cardinals can do that. For the Rams, so the Rams do this thing which a lot of other teams don't do. The Bears have done, is they will trade first-round picks for proven talent. So they grabbed Jalen Ramsey. They traded away Goff and some picks to get Stafford, Fatty Matty, and Stafford. And that puts them in a position to win this year. And I think it'll work out very well. McVay now has a quarterback who, if God forbid McVay doesn't win with his pre-snap reads, well, here's a situation where the quarterback can bail you out. Stafford knows how to read a defense. He's a veteran, and he can make a play. The Rams are very, very dangerous this year. And you have the 49ers, who also got a new quarterback to make their offense more dangerous. The thing is, I think Lance, he's a huge ceiling, but also a huge jump. So I think it's going to take some time to adjust to the NFL. So I'm pumping the brakes a bit on the 49ers, even though they do have a very strong roster. They do have a very talented young quarterback.
So with the Niners, do you see a scenario where they, like, if their record is decent enough where they're comfortably in the playoff race, like do you see them like having a situation where maybe they like use Lance like in a gimmicky sort of way where they maybe like have him like doing
I'm sure Shanahan is going to put Lance in a situation where, so the thing that Shanahan wants to do with Lance is put him in a situation where he doesn't have to make difficult decisions, where he can take advantage of his strong arm, take advantage of his legs, do X. If X doesn't work, do Y. Just a very, very basic play where he can beat the defense using skills and not have to try to read a defense. That's where he's going to be at a disadvantage because, again, he's jumping from Division II. He hasn't spent a lot of time against elite defenses, and these guys are pretty fast.
Yeah.
So it's a situation where Lance can take advantage of his skills and not have opponents try to put him in a situation where he's weak, where he doesn't necessarily know what he's supposed to do. So yeah, I definitely expect Lance to see the field and make plays. I think when he's out there, you're going to see plays where he's put in a situation to succeed. Shanahan's a good coach. Lance is very talented. I just don't think he's ready to start to play every down.
Sure.
Now there's Seattle. I feel like Seattle wasted Wilson's prime with just a ton of terrible drafts and some other questionable decisions. But they still went 12-4 last year. They still have a solid roster. They had this thing where in the first half of the season, they were letting Russ cook and they were crushing defenses. And in the second half of the season, defense is just, all right, we're going to play, I don't want to call it cover 2, but we're going to take away Lockett and the other guy whose name is escaping me, but we're going to take away your top 2 receivers, particularly mid to deep, and let's see what else you got. And their offense struggled in the second half of the season. And now Seattle needs to adapt. And I certainly expect them to. They're in a situation where, okay, we know what you guys have done. We know how to counter that. I wish they'd countered it quicker last season, but I do expect Wilson to bounce back early this year. I do expect them to be strong. Just the problem is the 49ers are also strong, and I think the Rams are actually very strong. So, tough spot. They may be the third best team, number 3 team in the NFL. All right. NFC South. We have the Falcons. They're going to be riding or dying with Matt Ryan for a while to the bitter end. And I do expect it to be bitter. He's going to be on their cap for the next 3 years because that's how they created the space this year. They grabbed Pitts again, who I think should be great, but tight ends adjust to the NFL. It takes time for tight ends to get used to the NFL. So I think this year might be a bit of a disappointment for them. The Carolina Panthers, I mean, they're riding or dying with Darnold. I hope that works out for them. Best of luck. Thank you for the trade. They're also a kind of oddly run franchise. So yeah, I'm not expecting great things from them. New Orleans, I mean, Jameis Winston is fun to watch. He's going to give their offense a new dimension, which is the deep ball, which is also interceptions are a new dimension.
Before you go into the last part, I didn't think about it until you like the way you wrote it, but we need to look back on the time where Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick were on the same team, because it's like they were like, as a Tampa fan, you just had to be like, what's gonna happen? Like
anything could happen on any given play, any given game. Like you have Fitzmagic and you have Winston, shit's going down. Might be good, might be bad, but shit's definitely going down.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. So go ahead.
No problem. Again, jump in whenever you want. They lost Michael Thomas. He's on IR, or actually, I don't know if it's IR or the pup list, but he's going to be gone for a while.
Yeah.
So that also puts them in a tough spot. And then you finally go to Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're in a situation where the division is soft. They brought back pretty much everyone important from the Super Bowl year. Like their conference rivals, like the teams in the NFC West, have to face each other, so they all have tough schedules. And you have Green Bay, which has their own internal drama. We'll see how that goes. So, like, you have to feel like Tampa Bay, they are in a great spot, which is why they are the prohibitive NFC favorites. They have a smooth path to the number one seed, but they also have a 44-year-old quarterback, and that 44-year-old quarterback just won the Super Bowl, and he played well doing it too. I just have a difficult time imagining a guy that old, imagining Brady just still getting it done next January. I mean, the only joy it'll bring me is how much it would piss Belichick off to see Brady go to another Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't think it's going to happen. We'll talk about my 5 predictions in a second, but yeah, I do think they've got the easiest path to the number one seed. I don't necessarily think they necessarily ride to the Super Bowl. So,
and I mean, if they get the number one seed, at least for Brady's sake, you'd have the warm weather in January, or warmer.
You're in Tampa Bay. You don't have to go to Green Bay. You don't have to face the frozen tundra. So yeah, like Green Bay getting it home. But again, they went to the frozen tundra last year and they won. So what are you gonna do?
So okay, so the last question, before we get to the listener questions, was who ships it all. So I mean, there's obviously a clear favorite, but I was wondering, did you make any bets? Are there any good numbers you see, or are you still scoping out?
Well, yes, I have gone ham on Kansas City this year because I like what they've done this offseason, and I think Mahomes is clear head and shoulders above any other quarterback in the NFL. So long as they don't screw things up, I like their chances. And again, they have a path to the number one seed in the AFC because they've got Buffalo at home. They do get Baltimore on the road, but they've done quite well against Baltimore in general. So I like the chances to be the number one seed. I like the chance to get the Super Bowl, and I like the chances to win it. In terms of who they're going to face, my pick is the Rams, particularly at market prices. I acknowledge that Tampa Bay has the easier path, but I really like seeing Stafford in Los Angeles. I like McVay as a coach. They are built to win now for a variety of reasons, but I do think they can win now. They have a very strong roster. And yes, it is a tough division, but I think the best team in that tough division. I think they have the best quarterback right now in that division. Well, forgive me. I think between him and Wilson is close, but I think they have a better roster than Seattle, so I like their chances. So yes, I have them beating Tampa Bay in the playoffs. I have them getting the Super Bowl, and I have them losing it to Kansas City.
And
So yeah, that is my
and you,
prediction.
and yeah, you don't and with McVay, you don't have to worry about him like saying like all of a sudden, oh, let's become a run first team. Whereas Carroll can just like say, oh, we're gonna focus on the run now. Like even though
Carroll
they've
can absolutely fuck with you at any time for any reason.
so
But just one thing I want to note: they did at one point pay a running back, which is part of the reason why they had their dead money.
yeah. Yes. So that's always so going back to before, that's always a red flag. You see a team paying a running back, you should.
It is a red flag. I mean, and you know what? One of the smartest organizations in the NFL, the Browns, paid a running back. They paid Chubb. Now they did it in a smart fashion, but it is still in fact paying a running back. And Chubb is awesome right now. Like if you watch him in the fourth quarter last year, he put up statistics that I don't know if they'd been done since like Jim Brown, whatever else. It was just amazing stuff. But or Barry Sanders, but I don't know if Chubb will still be doing that in 2 to 3 years.
Yep. Okay. All right. So we got plenty of listener questions here to close up the podcast. Thank you to everybody here. Some of them were sent to me through DMs here, so I apologize. I always like to butcher names here. The at Ladary lists for Seth, his take on good spots in terms of what are some things like rest, travel, bad matchups that changes view on a spread. So obviously at this point, in time, I would imagine a lot of those things are factored in, but are there
too, like short rest? People talk about it. It's one of the things that, like, yes, it matters, but it's also one of the things that I will see. Well, it feels like the market noticed that too. Same thing with bye weeks and all that stuff. And then you have these kickoff times. The one thing the market might not be taking into account is just how bad Kirk Cousins is in the night games. But I don't really believe that either. I just think it's small sample variance, or maybe. For most of the stuff, I think the market takes into account, or it's just not as big as it might appear.
Sure. Yeah, like if you see somebody breaking down a game based on like a running back being hurt, then you probably that's definitely like they're definitely got something that's not right with their
But let me
numbers.
tell you, I mean, if someone jumped on Tampa Bay immediately upon hearing the Zach Martin news, I'd say that was a reasonable reason to jump on Tampa Bay. Like losing a star right guard, you might not think it matters. It matters. So, enough to cover the VIG.
Sure. Okay. So the next one was from Chat Tim 3, and he was asking about what NFL analytics Twitter personality would have the best chance to win betting the NFL.
So let me first say that I've historically tracked Football Outsiders and I've tracked Pro Football Focus, and both of them have lost shitloads of money over my time tracking. Analytics, understanding how a game goes, even grading players, is a different skill than betting into the markets. And both these people, organizations, felt like, okay, we could do one thing. We certainly should be able to do the other. And no, that you can't.
Yeah.
And they're actually this offseason, I followed a lot of young analytics guys. There's some people coming up that I feel are doing great work, but I don't necessarily want them trying to turn that into wagering or whatever else. I want them to just look for pure knowledge and find stuff and learn stuff and increase our knowledge of the NFL. And that seems to be what they're working on themselves. So same page right now. I'm happy to see that. I don't really want them trying to turn attention to turn tout or like beat the lines. No, that's the dark side. Don't do that.
Yeah, and it goes back to your old rule of don't bet. But I'd say that like with people who think they know a lot about football, they have like this hubris that like they think that it somehow translates into be good at betting it, and that's hardly ever the case as we've found out.
Different skills.
Yeah. So, okay. So the next one is from Occam's Edge about the over-under of forfeited games in NFL this year. And I think we had a similar question last year. I think the question last year was like number of games that'll get played, and it was like over-under 255 and a half or something like that.
So the over covered last year, and I expect
Yeah.
it to cover this year as well. Well, depending on I fun. I expect them to play all the games.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember there was a Panthers Jaguars game, I believe, in 2011. This is like the Monsoon Bowl. And then there was a Dolphins Steelers game played in Miami that was again played in pouring rains.
That was 3. Yeah, that was 3-0 in overtime.
Yeah, like the NFL, they play the game. I don't care if you have to play without your quarterback room, as happened last year.
Yeah, and they'll push. They'll put. They probably won't do it as much, but if it means playing the game, they'll push the game back a day if they need to.
They might move games.
Yeah,
but they're playing them.
Yeah, I guess that would probably be that might be the more interesting question. How many games would be moved, and that would actually be a tangible number because I'm expecting certain things to come up, but yeah, as far as I agree, I think that you'd have to lay the under the 0.5. Although, like, I don't know, do you think like if you were going to do the same bet last year, the vig on this year would be any higher or lower on games forfeited?
So there's a couple things that would move along. First is that this year the NFL, I mean, they have the same rules as last year in terms of forfeits, but this year the NFL is making it's a point of emphasis that being ready to play is on you. Last year they're going to be a bit more forgiving and try to work with you in ways that this year, at least they're saying they won't be. Also last year we didn't have the vaccine. This year we do. That's a big difference. So I think this year it is significantly less likely that you would have a game forfeited than you would say last year, where last year in theory the virus just could have run through a team. Just it wasn't happening. They don't have enough guys who can go out on the field. This year that shouldn't happen.
Okay. All right. So we got a couple of questions here from Dylan M. 1002 here. The first one was relating to second-year guys that will benefit most from their first full off season. So who are some players you might be looking to fit that bill?
So along with tight ends, defensive backs, particularly cornerbacks, generally struggle their first year as they adjust to the NFL, learn all the tricks that the wide receivers use, learn how to not get flagged. And you see a real jump in the second year. And that's certainly what I'm hoping for from Jeff Okudah, because I loved his college film and I expected him to succeed in the NFL. And last year he did not that. So this year I hope from a lot better from Okudah. And also, as an aside, I mean, we've seen Penei Sewell struggle so far this preseason. It might not be about Okudah and Sewell. It might just be that the Lions suck and that they just don't put their young guys in the position to succeed. They don't train them properly. But again, that doesn't absolve me from my confidence in Okudah or from my confidence in Sewell. I mean, that's on me. So, and then let's talk about the quarterbacks because that's what really matters. Tua was awful last year. He was recovering from a major injury. He should be both physically and better mentally prepared this year. So if he does not take a major leap, then Miami really has to look at playing next year.
I guess the thing that works well for Miami, if I remember, they have the Niners pick next year.
Let's see. Yeah, from the trade moving back this year from 3 to 12.
So at least if Tua does suck this year, they do have like the draft capital to either
right. They'll have their own pick early in the draft,
or trade up and
49ers pick later in the draft to possibly move up a slot or two. Yeah. They do have an exit strategy.
Yeah.
So that next one is Burrow. So Burrow, he got hurt. I mean, injuries are random or at least semi-random if you're in Cincinnati. They have a bad history. So yeah, I'm worried for Burrow. They gave him a new weapon, but not a new offensive line. I think he went to a bad organization, and I think that's the problem for him. I do not think he's being put in the proper situation to succeed. I feel bad about that. I like him. I wish him well. I don't think things are going to work out in Cincinnati, and I don't think it's his fault. Herbert was excellent last year. And now we have seen quarterbacks play well year one and then regress badly year two, like that happened to Dak Prescott. Hopefully, with the new offensive minds working in, the guys coming in from New Orleans and such, hopefully he's better. If he does take the leap, it'll be the Josh Allen thing where, all right, we're now contenders now because we've got a young quarterback who's really, really good. That's where championship windows are born. And then his next question.
Okay, so then the other one from Dylan was about thoughts on defensive switching to strong D-line / edge and secondary and weak off-ball linebackers.
So this is part of the emphasis of stopping the run is less important, stopping the pass is more important. So let's put our money where we can really affect the game on defense. Like there's this general theory that defense doesn't matter, but defense clearly does matter. If you can get to the quarterback or you can cover, like that matters. And so we've seen defenses adapt to that. In terms of off-ball linebackers, yes, it is worth it to invest less there than say on these other more impactful positions. But there's also a limit. If your linebackers are just stiffs, then offense chooses where the ball is going to go in any given play. And if your linebackers suck, they can target them play after play after play. Like we've seen the Patriots do that when they face teams during the age of Gronk and Brady where, oh, your linebackers suck? We'll get used to us working in the middle of the field play after play after play until you prove you can stop it. And like a team like the Colts, they couldn't stop it. So yeah, you can build a better roster by not spending too much money on linebackers. We got to make sure your linebackers have a minimum level of quality. And also you have a team like Arizona who's invested actually in high quality linebackers, but non-traditional linebackers. And we will see how that goes. I'm again very curious to watch those games.
Okay. All right.
Sorry. My apologies. One other thing.
Sure.
You do mention building a strong secondary. It is good to build a strong secondary. You don't want to build a strong secondary by having like 2 elite cover corners and then just crap pigeons out there, because you'll find that they might not target your top 2 guys a lot, but they'll work to their number 3 and number 4. Even though if they're their wide receivers, those aren't their best wide receivers. The defense chooses who to match up against. But a weaker wide receiver playing against a guy who just can't cover, that'll work out well for the number 3 and number 4 wide receivers. So you do want to build a good secondary, but you want to build a deep secondary as well. So just one thing to know.
Okay. The next one was from Fat Music 14 about the fair value of Lance MVP. If I remember right, if I remember seeing his tweets right, I think he got Lance maybe close to 100 to 1, but I'm not sure if that's. I could just be throwing a number out of my ass. I'm not sure.
Let's just say it is 100 to 1. Let's just say that's the price he got. I would think that true value is sadly probably less than that, given that I do expect him to not be the starter for most of the season. I think that Garoppolo gives him the best chance to win right now, even though Lance can do some really cool things and some great things. And I think Lance could be a monster as early as next year. I just don't expect him to be that right now.
Sure.
And my apologies. I want to jump back to the last question for a second. We talked about linebackers and defensive line and edge. In terms of edge play, we saw the pass rush kind of win the AFC Championship game last year, where the Bills did not have much of a pass rush, and Mahomes went to town on them. And also Allen took 4 sacks. The Chiefs did a pretty good job against the Bills. And then the week after, in the Super Bowl, 2 weeks after in the Super Bowl, the Chiefs did not have much of a pass rush. Brady had all day, and he picked them apart. And Mahomes, with the injured offensive line, was running for his life all game. So pass rush matters. Offensive line play matters. So there are weaknesses that can be exploited. So just want to talk about, make sure, pass rush matters, deep secondary matters.
Okay.
Off-ball linebackers matter if they're fast. which is again why I'm going to be rebuilding my linebacker grading system, because like Jamin Davis, speed kills, and linebackers with speed who can cover, who also can still do their day job of attacking line of scrimmage. These guys can matter. So yeah, all right, we're up to Shine.
Okay. So we got the Professor Shine question here about you getting your take on the unabated thing with Rufus and Captain Jack. Now I had to ask him what that was about, because I wasn't. I guess there's certain tweets I just maybe just disregard, and I don't follow Captain Jack, so I had to look it up.
Not at
So
all. All right. So the question about unabated, I'm going to read a paragraph off of their website, which I think says it all. We will utilize our best-in-class simulator to find value in a variety of betting markets. Use your own power ratings or tweak ratings we've procured for you. Visualize your results compared with updated lines from over 30 sportsbooks in the U.S. So that sounds to me like, well, you can do your own homework, or you could trust us to find value for you and then bet it using lines we found for you, which is dangerously close to appearing on the chart. I don't think Sprague actually thought of this particular scenario, but if he does a 3.0, this will belong. So yeah, that is, I think, in their own words, the unabated in a nutshell.
okay. So I think Shine probably got his answer there. Okay, so Spreadopedia added a question yesterday about a non-quarterback most likely to win the MVP.
So in both a just world and a fair world, you could say, well, no non-quarterback should ever win, or you could treat it like this is the best player in the NFL who makes a huge impact and such, and that would be Aaron Donald. He's the answer I wish it was. The true answer is probably Christian McCaffrey, because he's coming back this year. He could do a lot of damage in both the running game and the passing game, lead the NFL in yards from scrimmage, and possibly snipe it that way. But I don't really think any non-quarterback has a chance. I don't think any non-quarterback should have a chance. I think the MVP really should be an award for quarterbacks, given how we view it as the most valuable player. It is going to be a quarterback.
And I think Peterson won it in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, but I think that was the last one.
And again, he probably shouldn't have.
Yeah. And that was people. We get fascinated by these bell cow running backs, and he's obviously
Derrick Henry got any votes last year, but he was quite the bell cow.
Yeah, and nowadays, I mean, adding that extra game, you're gonna see. Well, I guess the way the running backs use, maybe you're still not gonna see that many huge rushing totals from guys, but that extra game will add long term, you figure there's going to be a few more guys just because of the 17th game, because there was a bunch that made 2000 with 14 games. So yeah, okay. Right, so Iowa Skylar was asking how much you can deadlift.
And the answer is I don't know. COVID has kept me out of the gym for the last year, and while I have barbells at home, I don't actually have a full set of weights. So I can't tell you. I would answer if I could. If I had a full set at home, I would have gone earlier today and found out. But let me tell you, pre-COVID, I was able to carry a lamb, a lamb for butchering for a restaurant, down a flight of stairs without much trouble. And my rough estimate for those sizes was between 120 and 140 pounds. So that was then. This is now. Who knows what depth I've decayed to at this point? So
I guess the whole thing about the lamb. This is the first time I'm reading this part of the outline. So how are you are you in positions often, or were you in positions often to carry lambs? What?
So there's a restaurant where it's basically a norm situation where I've dined there over 500 times in my life.
Okay.
And it's a place where I knew the chef, I knew the owner, I'm still very close with all of them. And so it was a situation where the lamb delivery came, and their regular people who would normally carry it downstairs, neither of them were available, and there were
Okay.
a lot of the guys in the kitchen they're great cooks, but they're not big guys, and I wouldn't ask the waitress to carry down. And there's a
Sure.
waiter who's worked there for many years. He's a great waiter. He's not a young man, and so
Sure.
I was there at the time. It was like an hour before opening. I was like, okay, I'll do this for you. That's fine. And so yeah, and it became a thing where I would generally, there was a night a week where there was no corkage, which is also lamb delivery day, where not every week, but there were plenty of weeks where there wasn't anyone else on hand available, or they were busy. It's like, yeah, I'll do this. It's not a problem.
Okay.
So that's how
And
that.
and yeah, like that place, how many lambs a week do they even go through? You have any idea?
Well, I mean, it was one of those things where, again, going deep into the weeds, where on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday night, it was a regular special.
Okay.
One
Got
thing
it. So
the previous chef there was known for. On
okay.
the weekends, you're generally going to have more stuff that you're familiar with, a lot of the parmesans, or the fish that you've heard of, let's say a blackened tuna, whatever else. But during
Okay.
the week, when it's just the regulars, yeah, this is the stuff we're going to do well that the new people won't necessarily be interested in ordering.
Okay. Well, I'd say we hit the over under of lamb talk.
Yeah, well, I wasn't expecting much either.
Yeah, but I had to ask the questions because once I saw that in the outline and then you reading it, I was like, I have to ask about this
I have no
lamb
problem
thing
with the
because
question.
it's a I don't think too many people have carried a lamb. So the last question I see you added, I didn't add it only because it was a GIF or GIF, and just
Mhm.
I didn't know. But you added it. It was from Plus EV, and he's asking, why are you the way you are?
And the answer is, at least I think, because I was raised in a loving environment with books and green space, and part of me is just lucky, I guess. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I'm not a specialist in nature versus nurture. I can only tell you from my own experiences.
Okay. And one last topic, well, not really topic, but a question for me that I just thought of, because right before the podcast, I got offered a ticket for the Bears 49ers game in Chicago on Halloween. And I didn't think I'd be going to a NFL game this year. I still think I am. It just depends on what the cost is going to be. But do you
Wait, I
see
thought
yourself
you
going
offered
to?
to buy the ticket. I get it. Okay.
Yeah, so the ticket's already been bought. I'm not sure the expectation of like how much it is, and because budget. Everyone has their budget, so I don't really have a budget for like a $200, $300 ticket, but hey, if you're gonna give it to me for free, hey, I'll go. Yeah, I'm not gonna complain. But do you see yourself going to games anytime soon?
So I have actually, despite being a Jets fan, I like the Giants. I'm not necessarily calling myself a Giants fan, but I root for them. I have not been to the new Meadowlands Stadium. I hate the new Meadowlands Stadium. But as I don't know if you do follow me on Twitter, you see I've been to plenty of playoff games at other stadiums in the past because I like football games. I like going to games.
Yeah.
In particular, I like tailgating. So like I would like to go to a playoff game this year. I mean, I am vaccinated. I have no problem wearing a mask for 3 to 4 hours and being outdoors. I think that's a reasonably safe activity, even in a crowded stadium. I don't know. We'll see what the CDC says, and we'll see the statistics after a lot of these football games, whether or not they cause spikes or not. But yeah, I would like to certainly go to a playoff game this year. I'd like to go to a playoff game in Pittsburgh because I've spent some time in Pittsburgh. I like the city, and I've never been to a game there. Kansas City is another place where great food, maybe this best barbecue city in the country. I'd like to go tailgate there, and I'd like to go to a game there. It's a great stadium. I like Arrowhead. But generally, when I go to places that are a reasonable drive. So possibly Buffalo this year.
Okay.
They have a pretty good shot of hosting a playoff game. Let me say the mansion on Delaware Avenue is a great place to stay if you're visiting Buffalo. Highly recommend. So yeah, I would like to go to a game in Buffalo this year. Probably not a Jets or There is a non-zero chance I'll go to a Jets-Patriots game this year because I have a friend who's a Patriots fan. And tickets in New York are generally a lot cheaper than tickets in New England. He's a Patriot fan. I'm a Jets fan, so we can go enjoy the game together and talk shit to each other. So there's non-zero chance that'll be my first trip to the new Meadowlands. But more likely, if it's safe, go to a playoff game.
Okay, cool. And the my background here, the Illinois, that reminds me. Yeah, me and my wife are hitting our 6-year anniversary in a week and a half, and she bought tickets to Illinois' homecoming game on Friday night against Maryland on the 17th. So be my
I wish you guys best of luck.
yeah, it'll be my first time back, at least stepping foot on campus. I've drove through Champaign a few times on my way back from downstate in the past like 8 or 9 years, but I haven't actually stepped foot in Champaign since probably. What's that?
How long a drive is that?
About 2 hours, hour and a half. So not too bad. When my wife told me that she was getting tickets for it and she said she found a hotel, I told her to book it right away, because I remember when I tried to book hotels like 12 or 13 years ago for a game I went to with my cousin, that like the nearest hotels like towards when it gets close to game day are like 40 or 50 miles away from Champaign. So
yeah, otherwise you're paying through the nose. Yeah, I feel you there.
So yeah, so she got, I don't know where the hotel's at, but we're gonna be spending a day on campus, and so yeah, should be a good time. So yeah, no, don't have any expectations about Illinois. I never do, not since back in the day, but it'll be a good time. So 2 football games, I guess that would be definitely over what I would have thought if you would have asked me like 4 or 5 months ago. How many games I'd go to like combined. So we'll see how it goes.
I hope you have a wonderful time. I occasionally went to games at West Point for college football games. I'm not a huge college football guy, but I do enjoy the trip out there.
Yeah.
Last year I didn't go to any because of COVID. We'll see. I might go to one this year. I might not. I haven't decided yet.
Okay.
Non-zero chance though.
Okay. All right. Any final thoughts? I know we kind of went long like we normally do, but.
Just one. I wish Lou were back on Twitter. I still email him from time to time. I would have loved to hear any questions from him. But yeah, Lou, get your ass back on Twitter and at least do a podcast or something. I don't know. I think presuming his phone number hasn't changed, I do have his phone number, so I can. He did move. He's in Ramsey. You know what? I apologize. I shouldn't give out personal information.
No, he's still out there. Okay. All right. Well, Seth, thanks for joining. I'll add that link that you provided to the outline, and then, if you have any questions for Seth, I've seen Seth answer questions from anyone. So you have questions for him, you could add him at Seth Byrne. He's always open to answering questions, no matter how basic you might think they are. So
absolutely.
So Seth, again, thanks for your time. Everyone, thanks for listening. Good luck to your football exploits this year. And again, everyone, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.
Good day.